G'day world, and welcome back to Stuff We Do, where we do all the knife stuff you love. Knife reviews, knife tests, knife modifications, and outdoor stuff with knives. Today we are talking stop pins. Okay, I will explain to you in a second why this became important to me, but first, let's go through a few types of stop pins. Okay, if you look at something like this, that thing over there, that's the stop pin. Okay, so it's a pin against which the blade stops. Okay, the liner is great because it keeps the blade from going that way, and then the stop pin is fantastic because it keeps the blade from going that way. I hope you can see what I'm showing you. Anyway, let's just adjust this a bit. Sorry. Okay, so the stop pin, that thwack you hear over there is when it hits into the stop pin. Now this one is, what do you call it? Inset into the liner, but it doesn't go all the way through. Okay. Why would a stop pin be so important? If you buy a Chris Reeves knife, which is the pinnacle of tolerances and perfection in the knife world, or one of the top ones, if you buy a knife like that, even in the warranty, it says, do not flick your knife open and closed repeatedly. What do we do when we get knives? The first thing you do is you flick it open and closed repeatedly, okay, because we're breaking it in. So it puts a huge amount of pressure on that stop pin, okay. Without the stop pin, your blade wants to go more that way, and then you get up and down wiggle, okay, or it just goes that way if it's completely sheared off. Okay. Now, we have different types of stop pins. For example, if we look at something like this, it's the same idea as the one I just showed you. Over there we see the stop pin. This is an axis style lock, so the blade rests against the stop pin and then the lock, I hope you can see that, and then the lock catches it, okay? And that moves over the tang or the protruding end of this blade, okay, to keep it locked up. So yes, your stop pin is very important. And like I said, if even wonderful brands tell you don't flick open and close, you can see that it will most likely not do anything to the knife, and not in your lifetime, but it might happen. Okay, we'll get to that now. Now, not all knives have traditional stop pins. If we look at a slip joint, for example, it rests against the back spring, and the back spring is kept in place with one pin over there. Okay, so it might be a more solid design. Well, it's two pins at least, and then it hits against that thing. So chances of this one, it can't shear off a stop pin, so it will stop better against it over there. Okay, here's an example of another slip joint type knife. This is a biltong okapi. The blade rests against this piece of metal that's got one pin keeping it in place. Okay. Then, if we look at different types of knives, like these ones, they have internal stop pins. You cannot see anything on the outside, but still it stops. How does this magic work? Okay. It's got a pin on the inside of the blade. Okay, I will show you that now. So there's a track cut out of the actual blade, and then when it gets to the end, it locks up over there. Okay, and then it hits the stop pin, like the half moon goes around, and when it gets to the end, it's locked by a pin on the other side. Okay, so it can't move further. I'll show you the insides of that guy now. Now this one works the same way. Okay, it's got an internal stop pin, nothing on the outside. If you look at it, it looks like the liner, but it's not the liner that's stopping it. It's the internal stop pin. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, then we get these. These are like my favorite type now. The stop pin is over there, but the little screws go all the way through into the stop pin. Same with the little main street. well, the normal sized main street. The stop pin has got screws going both through the scales and the liners, because it does have inset liners on both sides, and then it stops it. Okay, so a very hard use knife in that direction. Okay, yeah, we're not talking locks today, we're talking stop pins. Okay, so like I said, these are my favorite types now. Okay, then you also get things like, okay, wait, before we get to the weird, interesting ones, something like this, where these thumb studs actually act as stop pins. Okay, so it's external stop pins, and they stop in that little hole over there. Can you see the little cutout over there? And it stops there. Now, I don't know, according to clever YouTubers, they say this is great because it also helps with lateral forces or more, because now these things are on the side and you have to shear off these two things to actually, yeah, get it to go further. So that's a wonderfully strong idea. Then we get things like this, the triad lock, which if you look over there, can you see that? Anyway, there's a stop pin on the inside over there, and then this back part of the blade gets caught in here. So it's like a back lock with a stop pin. So you see, it doesn't actually rest against the back, it rests against the stop pin. And that's what gives the triad lock its super strength, is that big hook that hooks in there and the added stop pin. Okay, so there's triad locks also explained. Okay, then we get things like this. This is actually marvelous. You see this piece of metal over here that's got two, what do you call it, screws going through it. Okay, this is a different beast because it doesn't have an axis style lock. It's a ball bearing lock, so the lock just keeps it going that way. And this huge piece of metal that's screwed here at two places keeps it from going that way. So this is actually a very, very hard to use knife until you get to the tip and such. But it's a fantastic knife, and I still think the Manix 2 is one of my favorite knives of all times. There we go. Now, we said this is wonderful because it's going through both sides and it stops the blade dead in its tracks. Now, why stop pins became an interesting problem to me is because of this knife. Now, I love this knife. This is a fantastic knife. Do you notice the piece of epoxy popping out over here? Okay, this knife, okay, I must admit, and there's lots of oil on it. Anyway, I must admit, I've been abusing this thing to death. Okay, 4 inches of awesomeness, but the one side of the liner is only G10, and then on this side we have a inset, or whatever you call that, steel liner. Now the stop pin is an internal stop pin. I'm going to put pictures in now. Actually, I'm going to put pictures in now. Okay, now if you've seen those pictures, hopefully my explanation will work better now. The stop pin sheared off on this side because it was only partially through and in a little hole in the G10. And then with me repeatedly banging this thing against things, the G10 split out. And then all of a sudden I had huge amounts of blade play. And I thought it was the liner, but it was not the liner. The liner on this thing has always been very secure, but I could not figure out why it was wiggling like that. Okay, this is even after I opened it, because I didn't realize that the white part on that first picture was actually where the G10 broke off, and now my stop pin was going back and forth. Okay, so that weird little thing I showed you on my finger, I had to take a washer that was thick enough and the size of the stop pin. I had to grind it down so it would fit in above the pivot around that thing. And then I had to grind out a piece in the G10 and epoxy that in there. But because I was losing my hole, I had to drill a hole all the way through the scale. So when I was done and it was epoxied and I sanded it down, then I could put back the, what do you call it, stop pin, and then epoxy it again from the outside. But I forgot to grind off this little blob over here. So I will have to take it off again and then grind that off, which will leave a scuff on the outside, but at least now it's working again and it doesn't have play. Okay, so stop pins. Nobody thinks about them until they stop working. Stay safe, happy, and have a good one. Goodbye.